shoot, come on.
Okay, here we are at 7:06. We're beginning the agenda for Tuesday, Jan 8th, and it'll be like deja vu and all over again, and we're here next Tuesday at exactly the same time, same place.
That being said, I responded today that I'm out of town February 1st to 13th.
And we'll cover that part of the tape. Thank you. Good, thank you very much, and thank you for that. So, call to order on the agenda before us, which is page 1 of 124. Can I have an adoption of the agenda? Good, thank you. All in favor? Good. Any changes? This is the time for batters up. I have none. Going clockwise. Councillor Abbott, none. Councillor Barmayer, I think you were happy already. Done, you're done. CAO?
There's some on-table correspondence pertaining to letters regarding 52 Brunswick and trees that we propose to put on table so that all of the correspondence can be
So we'll call that
together.
R12 plus.
Okay.
Perfect. Anything else?
Additional reason for closing. So under paragraph 14 of the agenda, add B, it's called municipal trees, and ground for closing, add G, legal matters.
Anything else? Good. All right. And we'll try and keep this vibrant meeting since you were here very late last night. Yes, he was. Okay. All right. All in favor of the amended agenda? Good. We're on public participation. There be nothing but cast for the ghost out there. We're good. No public. On to review and approval of minutes of prior meetings. Motion to accept. And then we'll go to amendments. Thank you. Any changes, amendments? Which I had a couple. Yes, Norm?
Page 7, number 1. I don't know if that sentence necessarily reads the way we agreed. So I'm suggesting that it reads, the applicant for tree application at 385 Ocean View Road is permitted to trim and level off the 4 firs mentioned in the application by an additional 12 inches from the BC Hydro cut line. The applicant must clean up and remove all associated debris. Just in case there's any confusion, because I feel like there may have been some confusion about what we agreed to.
Okey doke. Anybody else before I start rattling? Yes, Councillor Abbott.
Page 6, under 8, reports change in chair. That first sentence, the second line, I think for clarity it should have read on the agenda and relinquish the chair, but in earlier consultation with the CEO, determined was not in conflict of interest. The way it reads, it sounds like the consultation happened in the meeting.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine.
And on page 8, second paragraph, Councillor Abbott suggested that if the village undertake a major update, I was not promoting for.
Thank you, because that was going to be one of my questions for you later.
Okay, this bit I'm good with.
Actually, Councillor Abbott, on that one, when we talk more about the OCP, which I think it might be on the budget as a piece, will you bring this up again?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, and are you fine with the paragraph below that one, Councillor Abbott?
Scribble on it.
Okay, just giving you the double final on that one. Okay, anything else, Councillor Abbott? You're good? Good. For me, at the bottom of page 8, I think for the action item 104, if we could just go Mayor McLaughlin to follow up, and that'll clean that up, and I'm going to do that in another place too.
So instead of all the rest that's there, just say
Yeah.
Mayor McLaughlin to
Yeah,
follow up.
because it's getting messy here.
Okay.
Okay, any other changes? Going, all in favor? Good, moved, done. Thank you. Business arising from the minutes. I have none that I'm not going to cover off shortly. Anybody else? No? Oh, Councillor Abbott?
On the earlier conflict of interest consultation, can we get some clarity that a conflict of interest does not have to be pecuniary?
Yes.
That's a true statement? Okay. Okay. Because obviously in the meeting you suggested that because the mayor had no pecuniary interest. But it's not a definitive. You can still have a conflict of interest if you feel you have one.
Well,
Regardless of-
there's
regardless
such
of-
thing as a non-pecuniary interest or conflict of interest, yes.
Okay.
But I did not feel it was applicable in the circumstances.
Okay, sure. On page 11, D committees, those 3 bullets, can they go to the action mark?
Sorry, where are you?
Page 11.
The Curly Stewart Memorial Trust, there was 3 bullets.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
I kind of thought they could have done with going on to the action log to ensure they got closed out. The unfinished business
Yes,
action log.
it is unfinished business. All right, so I concur. So the 3 bullet points that are on the bottom of page 11 of 124, those would go on to the, let's call it the Feb 4 action items. The unfinished business action items. Is that fine, Councillor Abbott?
Yeah.
Thank
I'm good
you.
with that. And then one last thing on the agenda changes. And I'm sure this will be the last time we discuss this for a while. I did go and back and look at the procedures bylaw. It does state they have to be in the first and the thirds, but it does give the exception that if we decide to change it, council can, as long as the council agree to change it and it gets posted. I guess we've done that. We've met those requirements. I would like to say that I was a little disappointed that we didn't try to keep to the first and thirds. I do think it's important for residents, and I made that point. And then I also reflected afterwards. I have less than 3 full-time equivalents that do project controls on $150 million projects. We have tons of deadlines, and to move a planned meeting for a deadline because you want an extra week, it's 5 months away. I think we could have, we would have found other ways to mitigate it. So that's just kind of my final point on that. I really think we should try and get those first and thirds. I think it's important for many reasons. But this one's done now.
Okay,
Can I make a comment?
comments, so noted. Yeah.
So, a couple of things. One is, I have personally 4 years of experience doing this job in accordance with a set council meeting schedule. And it's been commented numerous times over that time period that council has made suggestions on numerous occasions to skip a meeting whenever possible so that staff have more time to get the work done. There's a lot to do on a daily basis and things that you don't plan on coming up all the time, and to actually have sufficient time to tackle the larger core plus items, the project stuff. There is additional time required, and management cannot be expected to fulfill that or accomplish that on their own time all the time, which is presently what happens a lot of the time. Secondly, it has been my experience that it is more difficult to cancel a meeting than it is to add a meeting. If you need to add a meeting, it's very simple to do. If you need to cancel a meeting, under the procedure bylaw, it's not that simple to do. So I think with all due respect that it's something worth trying, in my opinion. Give this a try, see how it works, see if it if it actually does assist staff produce more for council's consideration at those meetings, so those meetings can be more meaningful and entail consideration of greater amounts of work accomplished. There's a lot of time that is spent in terms of meeting all the procedural requirements of each and every meeting and doing the minutes and so forth. It eats up a lot of time. So the idea was to try and accomplish more. So our intent and endeavor here is to try and do more for the village. And I hope that by giving this a try, we'll see how that goes, and council can decide for themselves whether it worked or whether something else should be done next year.
Okey-doke. Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Abbott?
No.
Thank you. All right, that would be that piece. So on to item number 7, which is the unfinished business, which if I could ask Carol to amend the description of the item, the middle section, to read letter from Minister of Public Safety re-speeding on Sea to Sky, Mayor McLaughlin and CAO involved with Mayor of Squamish, RCMP and Pros BC. And for person responsible,
Sorry, and who?
I'll give it to you.
So yeah, I haven't been involved in Mayor Squamish.
Electronically you have.
Not really, but
Okay. No headlines for you then.
Take him out?
Strike. I like that. Strike them off person responsible too.
Okay.
I'm wearing my A-side jersey today. Actually, Carol, I'll give you the thing in just a minute. Let me just get it on. Okay, so we can talk about it now, or let's talk about it later when I'm doing my mayor report. That way I can ramble for 5 straight minutes. Is that fine with everybody? No, that's good, thank you. All right, next up, staff reports, CFO. Everybody loves a good draft water, solid waste, and my personal favorite, sewer budget.
So my report, so I have to switch it this way, had, it's the draft solid waste, water and sewer budgets. And as indicated in the report, the purpose is to take this look at the numbers and how we forecast the expenses to set the rates of increase tonight, so that at the next meeting, we could do the first, second, and third reading of the utility rate bylaws, because the utility bills go out the end of February. So basically provided the budgets with some analysis, and our usual approach is to just go around the table, see if there's any questions. I don't know if that works for everyone. Do you want to leave off Councillor Green?
Oh, I've got some minor highlighted. I was just wondering. What are internal allocations? I know you told me this before. I just couldn't remember what it was.
It's an estimate of the time, like the public works time gets charged directly to the funds, but the management time and just, the general cost of the water and sewer, that's our allocation of that time, and it's because of the fund accounting, the cost to, so it would be sort of an estimate. We keep it a fixed amount, but an estimate of management time. For example, when we do payroll, we're paying sewer, we're paying water, so all those costs. So there's an allocation for the 3 funds, and it's a net zero to the village. It's just, it's a credit to the general fund, and it's a charge to water, sewer, and solid waste.
Right. So it's proportional to the amount of work done on each one of those items.
Yeah, approximately. It was actually, I have to be honest, done a few years ago, and it's on our list to maybe look again. It's really just, in a way, it's a notional number, just so that they're conscious that the water budget does bear some cost of sort of the office, and would be nice time. Because, like I say, Public Works charge their time to the fund in which they work, but the managers don't, and the office staff don't as well. So when we mail out the utility bills, I mean, technically that labor should be charged this, but we don't get into that level of detail, so we just do sort of an estimate.
Okay. I had a couple more if you could bear with me.
Sure.
One of them on this,
Can I ask you to speak up, Councillor Green?
it's not working.
Page number and use hand signals.
Yeah, page 22. Yeah, a month ago I had a head cold and I can't get my voice back. So, page 22 on the offsets. I was just wondering, where is the offset here of the 2019 rebudget?
Yes, so last year we had $3,000 in the budget for a microscope and realized it wasn't quite enough money and we didn't buy it. But essentially what's happened is we've already taxed for it. So that's just what the rebudget is. So the cost of the microscope would be $6,400. We're rebudgeting $3,000 so that the net impacts on taxation this year will be $3,400. I'm usually careful to do that if we've taxed or something and don't spend it. I don't want to re-tax it. So it would be like incorrect to tax the full $6,400. So that's what that is. It's an offset. But the microscope scope itself will cost $6,400. But in a way, we've already taxed for $3,000 of it because
Right.
we didn't buy it in 2019 because for a variety of reasons it was what was
The
going.
public works manager made a mistake. It was 3,000 US without shipping.
Oh,
Yeah,
lovely.
yeah.
Would this not show up somewhere here though, or did I miss
It
it?
does.
On page 20?
It is
Oops,
in.
21, sorry.
Just a minute. So it's on under sewer materials, supplies, and equipment, it's in there.
Oh, okay.
So in the $11,150, $6,400 of that is the microscope.
Right, I got you.
Yeah.
Good, thanks. Yep.
Okay. Councillor Cunliffe, did you have any questions?
Nope, not currently.
Just go ahead.
I have several. I'll do close out. Councillor Arbut?
Well, a few. First one, just trying to understand what, page 16. I'll go down the page. I'm just trying to understand in my own mind the cost of servicing our borrowing. So 2020 budget, we've got a $600,000 loan we're going to go apply for. If I go down the columns, interest on payments, which I assume you would know, have gone up to $64,728, and that's because of the additional loan, I assume. That's the budget. And then if I go further down the page, I see right at the end, third last item on the spreadsheet, repayment of principal debt, $63,000. So
Yes.
these fixed term loans, they're not like a revolving credit, so this is the actual stipulated amount we have to repay?
Yes, when we borrow from the MFA, we get an amortization schedule, and it's a fixed rate of interest for 10 years, and then at the end of the 10 years, they'll reassess. So I don't know if you remember in last year's budget, we had been paying an older loan at about 7%, and it was reassessed at 3%. They give you the current rate every 10 years. But then you also get what's called an actuarial investment. So although it's a fixed rate of interest, the MFA, as you repay, they invest that money, and you get the interest on that money, crediting your amount. So what this is...
What the MFA actual gain on debt, is that what that is?
Yes, that's what that is, yeah.
Okay.
So it's a credit. So if you look at all of those combinations. So basically, we are getting additional debt of $600,000, but it's not until the fall borrowing. So we actually only have to make one interest payment in 2020, which I budgeted. And the rest is all the debt we've done over the years. And it's detailed more in our financial statements, but it's all the water debt we've done. So, and then this is a difference between the budget and the financial statements. On financial statements, repayment of principal just reduces your liability, but it's cash we have to pay. So when I do the budget, I actually have to take into account the principal so that we tax enough to make the full payment.
Okay, so, stop me out then. So on this particular account, whatever the amount of debt we have is, the actual cost on the 2020 budget is $64,728.
Yes. Plus the principal,
Plus the principal, 63,
minus the actuarial.
less the actual. That's a negative, but it's a
Right.
negative expense.
And that's the cash expense of the debt, like I say. So on the financial statements, it would be different. It would just be the interest offset by the actuarial gain on debt.
Okay. Right. Okay. So it's like $100,000 on this particular account that we pay to service the debt we have on water, is what we're saying,
In cash, yes.
round numbers. Okay.
And that, like I say, that's for all the debt.
That's all the debt on this water.
They charge the water, yeah.
There might be debt in other ones, right?
Yeah, we have some in roads.
Okay, salaries and benefits. It's gone up this year over last year's budget. Is that increases?
Yeah, the bulk of it's the increases, it's wage increases. We don't know, the contract ended December 31st, 2019, so we put in a 2% salary increase.
Up in the 3, okay.
And then, of course, the other expenses go up, the benefits go up, the pension goes up. And we have a couple of Public Works employees that will be going to a new level this year. They'll be going to Public Work Text 2, which is a salary increase on top of the 2%. So
Okay.
that's in there as well. And it's also partly allocation. How we do the labor models, we calculate what the Public Works employees cost, and then some's allocated to sewer, water, parks, and Public Works. So sometimes that causes a shift as well.
Okay, the ratios.
Which we adjusted each year kind of to try and reflect the actual of the prior year, but also, and like last year, we knew there'd be more time spent on water, so we allocated a bit more to water.
And prorated is slightly different. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the budget 2019 versus the actual 2019, and I'm assuming that is purely based on the fact that we had some
It's a vacancy.
vacancies.
Was the vacancy. It's a Public Works technician. So on that note, actually, if you don't mind me doing an aside, so last year was that, plus we had an employee at a workers' compensation for several months. So when they're out, we don't pay them, workers' comp pays them. So that was the combination of the favorable variance. But we have now hired a Public Works technician, but she won't be starting until May. So subsequent to this budget being done, I put that entry through, and it's actually increased the surplus to 39,000. You'll see that next week when I bring the amended budget, but the surplus now is a little bit more favorable in water because I adjusted the salary for now that I know what the start date is of the new employee. I'm not going to budget for the whole year when I know she's not starting until May.
Okay. I think I have one more. I asked a question on allocation, but you answered that Okay, so yeah, that's fine. Okay, that's 4% because the tipping fee's gone up. The page 20 maintenance. So the big decrease on the budget in the maintenance in the sewer, I'm assuming is because you expect to have a new machine, so therefore less maintenance. Is that what it is, or why does it go down 35%?
Is that where the pump out
No,
goes?
it's because in 2019, when we did the budget, it was before we knew we were going to be replacing the plant, and we had a large repair in there in last year's budget. We actually ended up not spending it, so you can see the actual spent was less than the budget, and we don't need to budget that this year, so that's why the budget dropped. We had a repair that I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was a repair we were going to do, and then we didn't need to do it because we were just replacing the plant.
But the actual to budget changed by $7,000, and the budget to budget 2019 to 2020 changes by $15,000.
Yeah, it was also the pump out, I think. We budgeted less for the pump out.
Okay. So it's not
Yeah.
an assumption on less maintenance for new equipment.
Oh, absolutely not.
That's what I was
No.
hoping.
Yeah.
More efficiency, but okay.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that may be down the road when we actually see, but at this point, most of the year, we'll have the temporary plant going.
Okay, that was my list. Thank you.
Councillor Barmere?
Yeah, I just have one question. We seem to have budgeted far more for maintenance for 2020.
In water?
In water.
Yes, I think I made a note of that. So note 5, that was, we have additional, and the Public Works Manager can speak to this, more water maintenance requirements mandated by Vancouver Coastal Health. That was about 15,000 of additional, maintenance and testing we need to do. We put in 25,000 for a water main upgrade for a section of road in Brunswick Beach,
Okay.
and we're going to do additional hydrant maintenance as well. So, yeah, it's gone up quite a bit.
So we can contract that out, because how would we we don't all of a sudden have that much more manpower, how do we actually spend that money?
It's, the dollars are for materials and supplies.
Oh, okay.
They're not for labor.
Not labor, okay.
Yeah. And paving.
I mean, paving is in the subcontract for asphalt, is that right?
Correct,
Okay.
Very good, Councillor Boromeo? Done?
Yes.
Thank you. If everybody bear with me, I've got a couple of things and they're pretty much at the 20,000 foot level. But going backwards off the three budgets, which is the sewer budget first, if you can, off the top of CFO, can you tell me when our current contract, sorry, let's try that.
Solid waste.
Got it backwards here, I jumped ahead of myself. Could you tell me, so basically you're running a flat budget for the sewer. If you could tell me, in conjunction with the works manager, the calendar of getting the new plant up to speed and when the recommended payment plan will come forward?
Our plan right now, and jump in, the RFP closes in February, so we anticipate in February having chosen someone, knowing what the cost is.
It
Which-
closes, sorry, ma'am.
Yeah, February 3rd?
It closes on February 3rd, and we'll have something to council the following night on 4th.
Oh, okay. And sometimes later, there'll be a recommendation.
Yes, so then how we envision the steps is, I had some notes here. This actually ties in really nicely with the utility brochure. And we pull out the Kelvin Grove anyway, and we have in the past done separate information to Kelvin Grovers. So we will give them it's a perfect time to update them on the status of the project, what it's going to cost, who we selected. By then, we might even know the timeline, because this goes out at the end of February. And we'll tell them the cost. I'll be able to show them what the surplus is. And at that point, we will say, as I've indicated in here, that that now has to be funded. And there'll be different options, and staff will be bringing a report to council in March. And that will encourage them to come, to give their input. And we will discuss different options like parcel tax in which to fund it. So the plan is a communication specific to Kelvin Grove with the utility billing, and then a report to council in March. And this will all tie in nicely.
So we've got the communication hammered three different ways here. Early warning, hard copy, can't deny that one. Follow up as more details are known, and then the ongoing update piece.
I have a question on that. Do we not have to contract this work almost immediately based on the condition of the current one? So we're not going to wait for this repayment plan in order to
No.
contract?
No.
We're drawing,
We're
we're drawing
doing
the
it.
money from reserves, and
Yeah.
then we'll then calculate how they will repay it.
You'll
And there's
make-
different possibilities.
So-
You'll
Sorry.
make the decision on the 4th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not
start
the
right away.
not the repayment plan, which will come
Yeah.
in the next
Yeah.
60,
No,
90 days.
we'll be
Take the
collecting it
reserves.
over, yeah.
So
Yeah.
we decide on the 4th to use reserves to pay for this
Yeah,
work?
probably just surplus. We wouldn't draw from the reserve. It would just be the
Well,
surplus.
it's a
and,
bridge to the final
yeah.
solution, and
Right.
I'm steering away from that right now.
Yeah.
The proponent will be selected and given the marching orders. Ready to go.
Very good.
Next thing, that'll tie in really nicely with just sending an actual letter of information right in the utility bill, which we know they have to open, so everyone will see it.
Thank you very much on that one. So again, going backwards, and I look forward to the recommendation on this and also the RP. Going back next to the solid waste budget, and I only ask this question for my co-leads for the Climate Action Committee, is that when does a contract end? So that if there's any specifications they have to become greener, we can start thinking about that.
Well, two things. The first question, it ends in March, but we wrote the contract to have the opportunity of 2 additional extensions of 1 year, which we've already communicated we want to do.
Okay.
But in terms of the greener, that is one of the reasons we liked waste control. They're open to opportunities for greening at any time. It isn't linked to the contract.
Okay.
Like you know, when the Climate Action Committee, in fact, George, who was our contact, I think would be
Who
happy to come
knows
to
what
talk to
this
you.
committee of
and-
vigilantes is going to
Yeah,
come
I've
up with?
already
So-
gone and spoken with George, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of good ideas that he had, and it's great.
George Jasper?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, he's great.
So-
So yeah, the one doesn't preclude the other,
No,
so.
that's,
yeah.
that's just out there for everybody to know.
They are, yeah, they're very
Good.
into the environment.
Thank you, and which then brings us to the big daddy, the water budget. And firstly, thank you for your conciseness on this and the detailed explanatory notes. As a big statement, I'm very pleased that, and I'll give the works manager full credit for this, having finished the tank work early enough so that we can actually capture just about all of it in the current fiscal and never have to see it again from a financial standpoint, other than a few other things. So it's going to be a nice wash when this is all done. And I think there's a couple of things in this, and I'll name the bigger topics first, and then I'll split it piece by piece. The first one is, I presume you'd like some guidance on this?
Yes.
Thank you. The second, I'm going to, as people are looking while I talk, the salaries are a very big component of this. The amortization, which is dead center on page 16, is jumped by a big number, which is the water tank, and I'm going to ask you to talk about that, because I understand the amortization is over a 50-year period. And the last topic, for the sake of argument, let's call it the store complex discussion on utility fees. So going slowly on this one, my guidance on this is that I would be fine for at least a 2.5% overall increase on this. If I look at the real cost, taking the 310 for the AM out, and I look at the other costs, a very significant component is maintenance, pro and contract fees, salaries and benefits, and internal allocations, all of which say people and cost to me. And I'm thinking general cost of living, which is where I'm thinking 2.5. So that would be my thinking on that. And that's for council to talk about. We can do this at the end after I've rambled on here. I'll stop before we get to the store complex. The other one is the amortization on the water tank, which is, I presume, what has boosted this. And so the question is that if we're going to give it a lifespan of X, and you can tell us what that is, should we not be starting to charge for that X replacement in 50 years or 40 years? I don't know what your AM is, so that gives you another minute. And basically it's a recovery so that we're not going to run through this begging scenario again. And also for council, once you've given us the answer, whether we're up to increasing taxes when we're already doing an infrastructure tax. So, CFO?
Okay, well, yes, I was going to draw attention to that although we have a small surplus in water, that's with adding the amortization back. And we are essentially required to start putting aside money for future assets. It's in our asset management plan, and it's in all the grant applications we've been applying for. There's a whole asset management section, and even when we do our grant reporting, we're doing the final grant reporting for the clean water, wastewater, the tank, and we're required to indicate how we are already starting to take into account how we will have enough money in 50 years or whatever to replace that tank. And the infrastructure levy that we're charging really is the catch-up, because we haven't been doing that. That's to kind of,
So we could, in theory, add a line item to the tax budget of, let's say, 0.5%.
Well,
Tank
I think-
replacement fee.
I think it's more just starting to budget so that rather than having it come to zero, you have a surplus that we start putting aside into a reserve for future replacement of assets. So it's more, the term is start taxing for part of your amortization. In the past, it was
Not for
always
specific
removed.
assets, even-
Well, specific water assets.
This
'cause
one would
that's
be a
the problem.
specific.
Well, it would and it wouldn't. It's future, it's not just the water
Ah.
tank, it's all the assets. So the water tank is actually probably gonna last the longest because it's the newest. So to have enough money, so when our other water assets start failing, we do have enough money to be able to pay for them without having to borrow and without having to we can draw it from reserves we've started to set aside for this. So it's a practice that all municipalities are having to face. I mean, that's why we started with TCA 10 years ago. We used to not even record our assets. Starting to record the assets and recognizing they only have a limited life, and we have to be in a position to replace them when they, and like I say, it's actually when we're accepting these grants and just good practice with asset management, we are required to start putting money aside. I'm not saying it's all of the amortization, but we have to start addressing the fact that, even when we do these grants, they've said you will never get another grant to replace this asset, because the expectation is future grants will just be for new assets or environmental things rather than the replacement of infrastructure that we had and it deteriorated. Well, we're expected to have taxed enough to be able to replace it when it deteriorates. So that was kind of the movement I wanted, even though we're showing a surplus with 0%. I'm not at all suggesting we have 0%. I also think it sends kind of a bad message. It's implying that our costs aren't increasing, like just our operational costs increase every year and we need to cover those. So, so that's sort of the purpose of this, is so council can discuss what utility rate increase they would like to see.
Because the top quarter of page 16, which is the revenue piece, and this is somewhat convoluted with grants and loan proceeds, what would a point equals how much?
1 point is, a 1% increase is $8,795.
One more time?
So $8,795.
9,000 for roundness.
So just to, I did kind of a little scale here. 2%
thank you.
would give us $17,500, and it would equate to a $34 increase on a residential utility bill. 3% would give us an additional $26,000, which would be $50 increase on the utility bill. 5% would give us $44,000, and it would be an $84 increase. And I just did 10, I'm not suggesting that, but that would give us $88,000, and it would be a $168 increase on a residential bill. Just to give it perspective, sometimes the impact on a utility bill is more informative than just sort of a lump sum of revenue.
Well, and it's house value too. Oh, no, what am I talking about? Sorry. Okay, well, I did this on purpose, so we would have this discussion. I recognize that we were the first council ever to do an infrastructure levy, and we're doing a lot of things in the right way. The CFO has made a compelling reason. I mean, I identified the labor component, but charging 2.5 is basically just to be rounding cost of living on our labor component, which is significant. So we're keeping up, but we're not putting away. So I would open the discussion up on what the members feel about this. So you can shoot your hand up randomly, or I can pick. Councillor Barmier?
So I guess what I'd like to see is a line item addressing specifically that, so future asset replacement. So how do we make that really transparent and obvious that we're...
Well, on this, I would, where we have this, we have the capital expenditures. Once the rate was determined, and then you see this budget next week, we'd have the actual user rate in with whichever rate, and then we would have a larger surplus, and this would come down to zero. It would just be, this is your transfer to the water surplus, and we would identify that. And then when the utility bills went out, I give an explanation of what the tax rate was, and at that point I would say that, we're budgeting for X amount of dollars to go into into surplus for future replacement of future assets.
Are you thinking that gets lost in the
Yeah,
whole
that's my
pie here,
concern, is
Councillor
that it gets
Barmier?
lost, that it's not
Yeah.
clear that we've
Yeah.
made that commitment and that we're...
It's not a separate levy, though. That's the problem. Like, the 10% is a separate levy. We tax a separate 10%, and it goes directly into a reserve. This is just essentially considering amortization an expense and taxing a portion of that, but then indicating it's going to... So I don't know how we could put it on the utility bill. It would be challenging, because it's not like a tax bill.
What about, like, within these statements?
Well, that's what I mean. They will be within these statements.
I mean, so that, to Councillor Barmeyer's point, so that it's clear to the average resident what we're doing. If there was, we've got sort of the, under surplus/deficit, then we have amortization, And we're basically taking it, it was an expense, and we're just pulling it back and not recognizing it essentially. If you had a line item right underneath it that said, and most people understand what amortization is in respect of their mortgage commitments and so forth. So if there was a line item right underneath it that said percentage of amortization or portion of amortization
Transferred to infrastructure
transferred to
replacement
yeah.
or.
That's what I'm
something to
suggesting, like,
describe
not
what
it
it
there,
is.
but underneath here, where we said, capital expenditures, repayment of debt principal, we would have a line transfer to, fund for asset replacement.
I guess if it's tied more closely to the amortization line item.
It's not really, because the amortization is a true expense. I think that's just, we use that as our guide to how much we should be putting away into a surplus. Like,
Right.
it's not like we're
That's
taxing for
100%
amortization, I think,
straight line,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a straight line. But what I'm saying is, like, I don't think we're ready at this point to tax 100% for
Exactly.
amortization. We just use it as our guide. Like, what we're saying is we're ignoring the fact that we've estimated $310,000 worth of our assets have deteriorated. So by building up the surplus, we're saying we're putting that towards the replacement of assets. So we could identify that as a line here. That's what I would plan to do. Like, this transfer from water surplus would go away. That would just come to zero. And whatever number I need, we would say it would be a transfer to, a reserve to replace assets.
CFO, can you find a way that is perhaps even cosmetic, but is transparent by your next report to us, that we identify a certain portion, as Councillor Barmeyer is doing?
Well, that's what I'm
here?
saying. When you see this next, it'll have the actual numbers in, and this bottom part will change, because by then I will know, depending on the utility rate, how much is being, and it will clearly stay transferred to reserve.
Let's hold the thought on that
Yeah.
one for a minute. Councillor Abbott?
I thought I understood it, and then maybe and then I'm looking at it and suddenly get myself confused. So why do we draw from surplus 62,000 and then transfer back to surplus 30,000? What's the draw from
Oh,
surplus?
the draw from surplus, yeah, that's weird. It's, that's an accounting term. It's the loan that we got a couple of years ago for the tank. So as you can see, this is, again, an anomaly of a budget. Financial statements aren't like this. We're showing, for example, the loan proceeds of $600,000 that are coming in, and for budget purposes, that's revenue. We don't have to tax for that. But next year, we won't spend all that this year. So as we continue to use it, I can only, God, how to explain this? So with the water tank, each year, we spent a certain amount over 4 years, and it was net zero taxation. So every year I would have to have this nominal amount because of the $600,000 that we don't use. This is a better way to explain it. Of the loan that we got for the water tank, we only used a portion of it in that first year, the amount we spent. So then we had some left over. So it essentially flows to surplus. And then I draw from that to pay for the second year's expenses. And then I draw from that to pay the third year's expenses. So that's what this is. That's the loan we got for $460,000 3 years ago. And I'm drawing from surplus for the portion we spend. The reason I have to do that, if I don't do that, we'll tax too much. Because if I didn't have that, then we would actually be in a deficit. So it's just kind of an accounting thing to make it all net zero. And the same thing's going to happen with the $600,000. If we finish the PRVs in all 1 year, then there's no problem. We've used that and we've used other money. But if it straddles a year, so for multi-year projects, the loan is revenue, but I can only recognize the portion of the revenue each year that we've spent. So that's what that is.
Okay. Your ears are glowing.
Sorry, it's very hard to, even from an account, it made my head spin even trying to do it. It is complicated.
Do you have
So-
global comments?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's one statement there that I think I might have misheard you. We get down to the end and we've got $30,355
Left over,
surplus.
yeah.
Are you saying that is all we're putting aside to pay for $310,000 amortization? So we actually put aside 10% of what we should have? Did I hear
Yeah.
you say that, or?
Well, what I'm saying is amortization, municipalities are realizing that we ignored amortization when we we're doing our budgets, and we have to because it's a non-cash item. But it's a good guide as sort of a goal to how much money we should be putting aside. Because some argue that you don't need to put that aside because down the road you have other options for getting assets. You can borrow, you can get grants.
Okay, so
But we
before
haven't been
you-
putting enough aside, and that's,
Before
sorry.
you confuse me,
Yeah,
by mixing
okay.
up information again, because last time you
No,
went
no,
too
go
far.
ahead, go ahead.
So, what are we putting aside in this budget I'm looking at now?
With a 0%, we would only put aside $30,000.
$1,000.
And what I'm saying is, I don't think that's enough, so I think you
But
should. go
should
ahead.
we have put aside 310,000?
Well, that's the thing, like at this point, we're not ready to. Some municipalities have reached that point,
I'm not
but
suggesting
we
you-
haven't. And there's a strong argument to be made, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. That three,
Theoretically or hypothetically, we should have been.
hypothetically, it's a goal to try and attain. Because the only other thing I was gonna say is the 310 could actually, you could argue is too low because it's depreciation on the historical value of the assets.
Scared me
So,
enough already.
yeah, okay. It scares me too, so, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that something that might help in sort of conceptualizing how much of this should we be trying to put aside is if you go back and look at phase one of the Asset Management Investment Plan report, there was near the end in that presentation, there was some different considerations, you know, like this is how much and you've got, you know, this hill to climb and you can do it that way and, you know, how much can you actually afford to do and so there's different considerations that we can look
And-
at down as we go
Yeah.
forward on this.
I'm actually glad you brought that up. Just our second phase of the asset management plan, which will be done in June, is taking that initial plan and fine tuning it. Like we're going in and putting what they call community-specific lives. So Public Works is working on that. Like we know our assets, and we may have said at one time they were going to last 30 years. But like we're actually looking at the Clap building and trying to figure out how much longer it's going to last. And we
Let me just, okay.
Okay, 9:09, we're back in session. Thank you. I just touched base with the CAO on a matter, which I'm going to ask for confirmation of modification of the agenda for, to add item 12C, and that will be cell tower. And then we will go to the first one, if that's fine. And so I put this on, and this is for my ask for Council Abbott, who's on rotation for doing the CAO's, the paperwork for the review, which as we've done is prepare the paperwork, do the draft mid-year, and conclude as close to the calendar year end as we can. So Councillor Abbott, if you and I could huddle and perhaps get a draft format for the end of February and work on what that looks like so that we can start getting alignment. Does that work for you or a different time?
We can shoot for that.
Okay.
I'm going to be away the 2 weeks between council meetings in February, I'll be in South Africa. But maybe-
How about we make it for, how about we chat, but we'll not set a hard date. I mean, I'd be fine with March as long as we got the format right. Is that good with you? Okay, and we'll carry that as an action item next. And the next one is Councillor Cunliffe, Volunteer Week coming up. And you know what that means, fun, fun, fun. And you're gonna probably get the biggest budget of anybody as we go without computers and new glasses and work trucks to fun. Anyhow, jocular. So if you could, by the end of February, give us an idea of what you're thinking,
Can give you an idea, yeah.
okay? Because then we'll get your work team going. That means not you, but other people. Good, and thank you very much. And the next item, and I'm mentioning this, and the cell tower discussion is going to be next Tuesday. And there will be of us here. And my worry is that there may be a split vote on how, I don't know what the recommendation is, I don't, but I would not want to see just from everybody putting time and effort in this, and I also believe expectation of the community too, that this is, the choices would be that, again, and I think everybody understands one being up at this level, we could push the discussion off till the second meeting, which is at the month end, which
I won't be here.
that creates a problem there. And so the other suggestion, and if those, if any, are not going to be in attendance, would a call-in be possible? It would be in my case. Councillor Bain, would a call-in be possible for you if you were away?
I will be here.
Councillor Barmeyer?
I think so.
Councillor Abbott?
I'm present.
Councillor Cunliffe?
Can I confirm when I arrive? Because I have not checked in the itinerary that my father has planned. But I will aim to do that.
Okay, for the,
But I do just need to check in.
fine. Fine. And so it is what it is, but I think everybody's starting to see where I'm going with, where I'm going with this one now.
Message received.
Okay, well, it's about all of us too.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so, and I don't like talking about a certain topic on mic anyhow. So I think just to refresh us, and again, don't know what the recommendation looks like, and so out of that, I'm not sure what the motions conceivably could be. But Councillor Barmeyer's got his hand up, so I'll give the CAO a second to reflect on this question that I ask now that he respond to. What does a split vote mean? Councillor Barmeyer?
So my question is, what's the rush? Why the urgency? We're not gonna have a full call.
We would not be talking about it for over a month.
Oh, what's the rush? I just don't understand the rush, so that's my question.
To my colleagues,
Councillor Farr, you're suggesting we receive the report, we discuss the report, there's no need to take a resolution?
or not do any of that.
Yeah, we're not doing either.
I think there's probably two options. One is to defer bringing the report and all the materials until whether it's the first meeting in March or second meeting in March or whatever. Like you say, there's no gun at the back of our head saying we have to have it done by a certain time. The only thing suggesting things be dealt with in a timely way is simply that it's fresh in people's minds as to what the issues are and having read the materials and all that kind of stuff. So with that in mind, I was going to say there's really two options. One is we could bring the material next week, February 4th, go through it all. And there's sort of two aspects as I see it. One is there's an obligation for council to determine whether the consultation process has taken place in accordance with our requirements, and so it's really a case of being satisfied that the consultation has met those requirements and objectives. And then the second aspect is, what does council want to do with the proposal to build a cell tower at the location in question by approving without subjects the licensing agreement. So in terms of separating those things, whereby if we brought the materials next week and then didn't have the discussion about whether, the ultimate decision that council wants to make in terms of adopting and accepting and approving the licensing agreement until a date which is a month or more down the road, maybe that's not the best idea, because we'll have spent the time going through it all and then pushing off the decision and that discussion. would probably be better to hold those two things in conjunction with one another. So I would say that if it's not possible to have all 5 councillors present next week in one form or another, and the desire and objective is, or the best result would be to have a full council to consider the matter, then I think the whole thing should be pushed to one of the March meeting dates. Myself, I'll be away February 18th on holiday. I'm back on the 24th, but then off to the CAO conference on the 25th, coming back on the 28th, which is agenda prep, put the whole thing together day for the following week, for March 3rd or 4th, whatever it is. So that could be a push for me, and brand new staff that will have just started. So my preference would be that if we're going to go that route, that we would push it to the second meeting in March. Was there one of the March meetings, Councillor Abbott, that you were not going to be available?
I've now planned my trip. I'm going to leave after one council meeting and arrive the morning of the next one. So I'm going away for 2 weeks, but I'm not missing a council meeting.
Okay.
As best you know.
Unless the flight's delayed, but I will, if it's not delayed, I'll be here very sleepy. I would have flown 42 hours, but I'll be here.
And,
You know, in terms of other people's timelines and so forth, I mean, if the council decision was favorable in terms of approving the agreement and giving the proponent the green light, then, you know, they obviously would like to get things moving during a good construction window, but I don't think it's the end of the world if it's delayed a month, month and a half, whatever.
It's just a question.
I think it's more important for council to have the ability to properly review it and feel comfortable that everyone's weighed in and all voices have been heard.
which is why I brought this up, because, and I don't know where everybody stands in this, and I've seen, we've all been teased by the information, but, and it'll probably be the very significant, one of the really significant meetings that we have this year. And so
So that's being said, Mantrap, from a personal perspective, I haven't been on a family holiday for almost 2 years. So to potentially spend 5 hours at a meeting while I'm spending time with my father who lives thousands of miles away and I see periodically over the course of a year. I haven't seen him in almost, it'll be a year and a half. I would prefer to push it off. I have to be frank.
well, your advice is what brought this to the table. Thank you very much. Because I would hate to see a 3-2 vote on this decision, if ultimately we have to make some decisions. I would hate to see a 3-2 vote. That's not, it is what it is, but I would hate a split decision at 2-2 even more. And the best of my understanding is that if that were the case, then it usually is put off before it can be represented for some period. Is that correct, CIO?
Not necessarily.
Doesn't feel right if you split vote and you say, well, I've got a new member here, and suddenly the pressure's on the new member to, rest of us might as well not be in the room, actually.
Well, I think the desired result would be for all council
Yeah.
to have the opportunity to debate the matter.
All right, so just to recap then, the choices were information only on Tuesday, and with what I would expect, all things in flight paths being on time and equal, then we would have full council members for the last meeting of the month, then we could proceed to make decisions then.
Sorry.
Or we could wait until the
Last meeting was March.
end of, yeah, what month are we in? We got lost a
Yeah,
month
month and
here.
a half.
Wait a month and a half.
gap.
Month and a half,
Not
count.
recommended by CAO.
Okay,
And I,
Or do everything on the last
yep.
meeting in March,
I do everything on the last meeting of February.
in March.
March, sorry.
just a little concerned, I mean, there's been some correspondence and been a lot of village input in this. The deadline's been out there for a while.
I've announced that it's happening next Tuesday.
It's happening next Tuesday. There was 2 decisions to be made. We came for making one decision. Does it make sense to split them?
Well, I think we'd be duplicating our efforts to a large extent in terms of the time we spend reviewing materials and the key issues. So would suggest that duplication of effort is probably not the best use of everyone's time. And with a lot of lead time, it'd be an opportunity to make sure that materials are ready and out there and everybody's got a chance to review everything.
I might have 18 hours of flight time to read it.
Well, I mean, there's also there's, as Councillor Abbott points out, I mean, best laid plans and suddenly it doesn't work out and we're stymied at another end. Well, to my colleagues, I really, the key pieces are to have all of the members here along with the CAO, because I think without him here, it puts tremendous pressure on the CFO to answer questions on things you may not be entirely familiar with. So other than delay, I really don't see an opportunity where this fits unless somebody's got a silver bullet they want to drop on the table. I'm empathetic to the community. I mean, I'm empathetic for me too. I'd like to get to it. But I accept reality when we can't do it. If we can't do it, then we're gonna have to get something out in the wire for Friday, for sure.
I prefer not to do it. I mean, procedurally, we still can. We have 4 people, we have quorum. It depends what is put forward.
I agree, but being the person that I am, I worry for little skeletons all over the place, and I mean, it also precludes one of our members from being part of this. So, I mean, that's life too. I mean, it's a mucky deal on a major topic. You need to see a quorum on proposal here. I'm fine to. It's either
I
we
think the
go.
more complex these issues are and the more weight bearing they are, I think the longer they need to make a decision. I don't see any sense in rushing this and having a partial council vote on it. This is a long-term commitment we're making. Once that thing is built, it is there for good. So I don't see any rush. That's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, let's. I'll close it with where I think we are, and we'll go with that. Councillor Abbott, quick recap. What's your number 1 choice?
We'd like to get it done.
I think we know where Councillor Cunliffe sits. Councillor Bain.
Well, I think going to the seriousness of the decision we're about to make, I think we should all be involved, and if it takes a little longer, it takes a little longer. Saying that, knowing myself, I'd rather get on with it, but I think the best thing for us to do is to delay it, so we can all be here and give it full consideration. I think any decision we make would be showing respect for people's input So I think it's probably the most respectful thing that we all take part in.
Right, fine, I concur, I'd like to get to it, but I'm cognizant of others, and I'd like the full table here, so I think we should put this off to the end of March. There we go. Thank you, that concludes that piece, and public questions, and please don't ask about the cell tower. Okay, thank you. Comments, thank you very much for coming, twice. All right, so we're going to go to the closed council meeting, and it's per page 3 of 124. And the topics are intermunicipal business licensing proposal for ride hailing, that the council considers negotiations or related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages could reasonably be expected to harm the interest of the municipality if they are held in public, and B, item as municipal trees, and C.
I forgot one thing. Kelvin Grove,
Property?
lot sale update.
KG property, item C. Actually, let's make that item B. So it'll be A, the intermunicipal, item B, the KG property, and item C, municipal trees. And the reasons for going into closed are 91, J, K, and G, and N, and they're all there.
And E,
And E, which is,
disposition of property.
thank you, disposition of property. Council does not anticipate reconvening the opening meeting for any purpose other than to adjourn the meeting generally and report out if applicable. Can I have a motion that we proceed accordingly? Thank you. Second, or any discussion, any changes? All in favor? Hands up. Councillor Abbott, thank you. We're going to close. Thank you. Good. Hello, we're back at 10:33, and the in-camera session is completed, and we're back into live for the for our meeting. And the following things are being reported out. And the first is that with respect to council discussed ride hailing, and council has asked that the CAO find a way to support ride hailing. 2, that we report that Realtor Kim Taylor, who acts as our agent with respect to the Kelvin Grove property, has changed realty firms, and council approved this minor technical change in the listing. Number 3, that specific to correspondence that was in camera, the legal responsibilities and liabilities with respect to this correspondence pertaining to 52 Brunswick were noted. On 52 Brunswick and the correspondence, council has directed that the CAO respond to the owners in accordance with legal advice. And that would be concluding our reporting out. Can I have a motion to close meeting? Thank you. Second, all in favor? Good, we are done. Thank you.
You turned off the recording?
Let's turn it off.
Yes.